Well, hello there. I'm Papa John, and happy Halloween. I love talking about movies that I love that other people don't. And that brings us to Halloween and the spooky day. And the most infamous franchise for that holiday is obviously Halloween. Why wouldn't we talk about any other film franchise on Halloween than Halloween? I gotta stop saying Halloween. Nonetheless, I have some pretty controversial opinions when it comes to some of these movies, especially in terms of the Halloween fan base. But that brings us to today and the movie I'm talking about today, and that is Rob Zombie's Halloween remake. And it's a very interesting one because when you go on like online communities, you go to YouTube, Twitter, which I don't have anymore. But you go on the online communities, and especially within the Halloween fan base, it just seems like a lot of people hate this movie. And it's always at the bottom of people's rankings, and even outside of the online community when you talk about it with coworkers and whatnot. This movie doesn't have a lot of favorable opinions, but weirdly enough, it is actually one of the highest rated on IMDb. Let's get started, because now I will be defending Halloween 2007. And first things first, I'm a firm believer that there's no such thing as a perfect movie, and so there are some things about this film that I am not necessarily the greatest fan of per se, or just some small nitpicks. I do think both sides of this movie are kind of rushed. Not necessarily the first part. I think it's not necessarily rushed in terms of what was written, but I do feel like there's other things that they could have implemented to help flesh it out, per se. And then I think once you just get into sort of the Haddonfield modern day retelling of the John Carpenter film, I think it does feel a little rushed once you get to that point. And it's not always the best acting, but you don't get that in most slashers. Slasher isn't a genre known for its acting, and that's okay. Now on to why I fucking love this fucking movie. A lot of people hate this movie because of all of the child psychology stuff and just diving into the mind of Michael Myers in like the first part of this film. And I love that aspect just kind of because it's playing off of something that was very public at the time about sort of the warning signs of how to detect a serial killer, a potential serial killer or murderer at a young age before they commit the crimes. And it's something they play into with like Minority Report and, some other stuff, like non-horror stuff as well. And I just love them kind of playing into that idea. Granted, they didn't have a whole lot of like criticism about that idea in this per se, but I like the idea of them playing off of sort of a real world kind of instance, especially when they're talking about in the principal's office and the principal's talking to Michael's mom about harming animals can lead to other things. I kind of like that idea, and I like the exploration of it for as little as you do get. I still like that they explored that concept. And another thing that I think a lot of people in retrospect don't entirely appreciate about this film that they do appreciate about 2018 is that in the remake, they just dive in, they just do the Myers family, that Laurie Strode is the sister of Michael. Whereas in the original film, that wasn't actually in the original film, it was something added in the original Halloween 2. And as a franchise as a whole, I think it's better and more interesting to do the non-family route. When this movie came out, that was just part of the franchise. And I don't blame them for doing that. And I think they still told kind of an interesting story around that you didn't get from previous films when it came to exploring the family stuff. And then probably the best part about this movie is Michael himself. Is Tyler Mane's Michael Myers, I think, is probably my personal favorite Michael Myers. I still, as a movie, heavily prefer the original. It's just undeniably the best in the franchise, in my opinion. But I still think Tyler Mane might be the best Michael Myers. I think he's just so physically demanding and such a big physical threat in this film, and it makes for some gnarly kills that I love. They're very brutal and they're gnarly. They don't really hold back, and I like that. One of the reasons that works so well is because when you look at horror at the time, it was very much that Saw and Hostel era where you get these big, gnarly, just kills and gore. And so you get this, and it's just bringing Halloween into that modern day horror, the place horror was at the time, and it just includes it and throws it in there. And as a remake and a reimagining, I do really appreciate that, them finding a way to do it without ruining the first movie. Because you can still go and watch the first movie. This doesn't ruin it. And it's just a nice way if you want to watch the first movie, but in a late aughts setting and horror trend setting, then you got this. Some people have criticized this film because when it does get to the sort of remake side of it, where it does at times feel like a beat for beat reshot just in a modern setting of the original Halloween, people argue that it's just a beat for beat. It is not, in my opinion. I think they hit the right beats when they need to hit them, but they don't do it the same way that the original did. Storyline wise, like when Laurie discovers the Judith tombstone in the house in the original film, that's when she's kind of discovering the murders, and she opens the door and you see it above the bed. Whereas in here, she wakes up in like the basement of the Myers house and everything, and it's there and all of that. So like stuff, you get the same beats, but there are different moments in the story, but it's still the same story being told. And so I do appreciate how Rob Zombie kind of came up with all of that. And one thing I appreciate is also when she is in the basement in front of the tombstone and he hands her the little like picture that his mom gave him when he was a kid in the elementary school. In the mental asylum. Those are two very different things. And she's looking at this picture and she sees like a kid holding a baby, and she says, I don't know who these people are. To Michael, he can't imagine, like, how do you not know who these people are? That's you and me. And like in his brain, that's like, it's not comprehending. But at her end, she's not comprehending that because like she doesn't know. She was too young to know anything. She's just a baby. And everyone's basically been telling her, because I don't even know if she knows she's adopted at this point. She can't comprehend what Michael is doing, but Michael can't talk. And like mentally, he can't do anything. And so it's one of those moments where it's uncomfortable because you know Michael's going to flip out. But there is a chance for Laurie to avoid that if only she knew the truth, which she doesn't. And so that does actually add to another aspect to this film that I really didn't even realize until my most recent rewatch, and I've seen this a bajillion times, and that is when I was watching this most recently, that scene where he shows in the picture and stuff, how she could have potentially gotten out of this so much easier if she had known the truth about her backstory and who Michael was. And then she saw the picture and knew, oh my gosh, you're my long lost brother. Obviously, she's not going to forgive him for killing all these people, but it could help her out of the situation a lot easier than running away while he's trying to brutally kill her. Now, Rob Zombie does tend to be a controversial director. He has his lovers, he has his haters. I tend to be a defender of most of his movies. Granted, there's only like 2 of them I would say I love, and that is this one and The Devil's Rejects. Most of them I still defend and genuinely enjoy, except for 2 of them. There are 2 that I hate. But one of the things that most people seem to criticize him for, especially, is his dialogue writing and his writing of dialogue. I don't know why I just said that twice, but that tends to be one of the things that most people dislike and hate about his movies. I defend his dialogue because he's a horror director. Well, mostly a horror director. We don't need to talk about the monsters. And so within sort of his version of horror, when it comes to these more grimy horror films, I think it fits the environment and the atmosphere that he's building. And I think it even at times adds to the horror because it adds to sort of the disturbing uncomfortableness of the movie, of the atmosphere. And so I think his dialogue works almost as atmosphere better than it does as natural dialogue.
I'm Joe Grizzly, bitch.
I almost forgot. I am defending the director's cut of this, even though I don't think there's a huge difference. There's one major difference in terms of a specific scene, and that's how he breaks out of the mental asylum. And I probably should have mentioned this earlier. I forgot about it, even though it's one of my biggest things I like to defend about this movie. So, but when he breaks out in like the original version, which I've only seen once to be fair, it's just kind of him generically breaking out of just a very generic breakout, just breaking chains and killing people. Whereas in the director's cut, it kind of actually adds a reason to his breakout. And I've heard people don't like the director's cut of this just because it makes Michael a hero. I 1000% disagree. Yes, he does incidentally potentially save that woman, but that is not why he did what he did. He did not do it to be a hero. He did it to make the commotion, to make the noise, to make the annoying people stop annoying him. He didn't do it to save anybody. Did he save that person? Potentially. He might have also killed her. We just didn't see that. Like I said, he wasn't doing it to save someone. He was doing it to make the annoying sounds stop and to punish the people who were touching his masks, because it was established earlier, you do not touch the masks on his cell walls. Now, it goes without saying, I don't think this is the best in the franchise. I think that distinction undoubtedly belongs to the John Carpenter original from 1978. However, I do think this is my second favorite. This is the second best in my opinion. I almost made this video about my third favorite in the franchise, which is the most recent one, which I also love to death, while other people really do not. That being said, I decided to do it on this Halloween entry because it's the one I'm more familiar with and the one I've seen the most out of those two. But as I said, it's not the best, but it's pretty damn good. So I'm going to give it 4.5 slices.
Little boy being held in custody.
So tell me in the comment section down below why I'm wrong, why this is a disgusting entry in the Halloween franchise. Tell me why I'm right. Tell me why you think it's better than the original. I'd like to hear that discussion as well, because even for as much as I love this, I don't think it compares to the original. That being said, hit the thumbs up, hit the thumbs down, do whatever you want. Hit the subscribe button if you want to hear me talk about more films that I love that other people hate, because there's a lot of films that I love that have bad reputations. And have a happy Halloween. Have a fun, spooky day. I will be spending my spooky day dressed as Young Gravy, so keep it hot. Yeah, there you go. Cover up that face of leather. Doesn't matter. We're not here to talk about the Sawyers. I kind of wish we were, though. I will someday. They're awesome. Dog will hunt.